Hey guys, Paul Vecchio, Tripoli Productions, and today we're going to go over how I got this look for our latest promo entitled Reception. So this is the final look, and this is what it looked like straight out of the camera. Actually, that's not even true because we have a little bit more saturation and exposure added. So once we drop this and remove that, that's what it looked like out of the camera, and this is what it looks like after the grade. So let's jump right in. I'm going to reset this. Open up my raw tab, and I'm just gonna go in here, and what I like to do is switch it to clip. The rest of these settings are basically straight out of the camera aside from the exposure, which we dropped down to -1 and saturation boosted up to 35. So that just gives me a better starting point. First thing I want to do is come in here. I'm just gonna make this bigger so you can see it, and I'm gonna drop my shadows down to 0. So we're just gonna bring this down, come in here and use the curve to kind of give us the look that we're going for. One of the things that I don't like to do when making an adjustment like this is just use the gamma slider, because basically what it is just a point in the middle, and it just drags it up or down, and you don't really have too much control. So with the curves you get a little bit more of a fine-tuned control because you can favor one side or the other. In this case, this is the shadows, this is the highlights. So what I'm going to do is drop it down with a bias toward the highlights so that we can bring down more of the image. What I'm noticing here is that the overall image is becoming darker, and that's not what we really want. So I'm going to jump back into the first node here, and I'm going to look at my scope, and you can see here that most of the image is in the shadows, and that's not what we want. We want a fatter starting point. So what I'll do is I'll just boost the highlights. And we want to make sure that we don't clip the luma channel here. I'm not really so worried about the red channel here, because if I just bring it right there to where it's clipping, it's not really enough. It doesn't bring me high enough here, so I'm just going to boost that up and protect the highlight there, and that's good. Overall, that's good. I'm just going to jump back into my curve here and just kind of make some adjustments here. I don't want it to be too dark, so I'm going to bring up the shadows a little bit and also maybe pull this down, but watch what I'm doing with the shadows and just kind of do this push-pull kind of thing until I get something that I like. Next thing I'm going to do is actually bring up some saturation. Not too much, just a little bit. And now I'm going to look over here at the blood, and I'm seeing that the blood it's actually looking very fake. So what I'm going to do is sample the blood. We're going to zoom in, and one of the things I'm noticing here is I'm capturing way too much of the image in the sample. So I just want to bring the width down to kind of isolate it to the blood. So that's a good point right there, and we're looking good around there. One of the things I'm noticing though is that we're grabbing too much of the skin tone. You can see all this here is actually skin tone. It's not blood. Let's play with the saturation, the high. I'm going to slide that down. And what I'm noticing is that the blood is going away. So what that's telling me is that the blood has more saturation than her skin tone. So we actually want to do the opposite. Grab the low and push it up. And kind of do that until we have a clean sample of just the blood. And it's looking good on the shirt. We're capturing most of that. There's a little bit of a edge here that we're not, but what we can do is clean the white a little bit so we get a little bit better of a sample, and we're going to blur the radius, and what that's going to do is soften the edge so that we don't have a hard edge that stands out when we make whatever corrections that we're going to make. So that's looking good. What I want to do is bring down some of the saturation. The blood is just way too bright. It's a purplish red, and it's not really where we want the color to be. I mean, if you think about it, she's standing in a dark area and there's not a lot of light there, so it doesn't really make sense that the blood would be that saturated. So we're just going to bring it down, and actually I'm going to play around with the hue on it because it is a little bit on the reddish purple side. So play around with the hue and then desaturate it. And that's looking a bit better. And actually, if you look at it here, you can see that's what we had, and that's what we corrected it to. Now, it's still too bright for my taste, so I like this look of having the blood look more soaked and pooled in an area. So if we drop the shadows, you can see it gets darker, and drop the midtones a little bit. We don't want to go too far because then it starts looking weird. But, you know, we do want to just make sure that the blood is in the pocket, you know, where we like it. And that's looking a bit better. And it's still too saturated, so I'm going to pull out some saturation. Okay, right there is good. Next step for me would be to take a look at this and scroll through it, because sometimes the sample flickers, and you can see that here. You know, you get a little bit of that flickering going on in there. So you want to make sure that we don't notice that in the actual image. So we're going to play it back. Actually, make sure our loop is on so we can watch it. Hit play. All right, it's looking good, but one of the things I'm noticing is that there is a little bit of weirdness going on in his hand. So you can kind of see that in there. It's a little dark. What we need to do is we need to isolate her, because the sample is basically for the blood on her, right? So we're going to shrink this down a little bit and take our mask tool and make sure she's within the mask and that we're not leaving any part of her out. And we're going to come in here and feather the inside and also the outside. So that's good. And we're going to have to track this because she's moving. So we're going to track forward. We want to make sure his hand doesn't go within the mask here, because then we'll start to see that weirdness show up again. If I scroll here, you can kind of see that she kind of falls out of the boundaries of the mask there. So it's not bad, but we want to make sure she stays within the boundaries of the mask. In this case, it wouldn't be too bad because she kind of turns her head and that blood sample might go away, but we just want to make sure that we're not introducing anything weird by having her exit the mask area. So that's good. And we're going to track backwards. Okay, one thing I'm noticing is that the mask is too small now because the shot kind of pushes in, so we're just going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so we'll scrub through it, and that's looking good. If we look at this, we'll notice that there's nothing weird going on with his hand. And we're just going to watch it one more time just to make sure there's nothing weird going on with her. Okay, perfect. So that's good. Next step here, I kind of want to add a little bit more saturation into the highlights here. If we look at the image, I feel like this could pop maybe just a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is come in here to our Luma versus saturation. I'm going to put a point here and watch what happens when I grab this, because this is only going to saturate the highlights now. But look what happens. It's too much, so you don't want to be heavy-handed. So we'll just bring it up a little bit. And kind of bring up a little bit more here to get more of the highlights in there. I'm just going to bring up the overall saturation now just a little bit. So right there is good. And now that I did that, I'm actually thinking that that highlight is popping too much. So let's bring it down. That's good. I like that. At the beginning of the process, I forgot to add my power grade. All right, so denoise and sharpen. I'm going to bring this out and put it at the beginning. And what that's going to do is get rid of the color noise, but keep the black and white noise, so it's more like a film grain that you get out of the camera in this particular shot. It's really not that big a difference because there's not a lot of noise, but if you did have any colored noise, that's a good way to get rid of it. And you can view the very verbose tutorial I have on my YouTube page at the link below, and that's going to explain what that node does. If I wanted to sharpen, I could just jump into it, click on this one, and again, watch the tutorial so you know what each one of these nodes does. I'm just going to drop this down slightly, 48, 47 at the most, because it's going to be too strong. I'm going to go 48 so I don't have an overly sharp look, and I'm going to exit. So that's just going to give me a little bit more snap to the image. Final step is I like to come in and add film convert. That's looking kind of cool, but it's a little dark. The curve kind of just makes everything darker. And also the film color desaturates a lot of the colors and it kind of pushes them around to different tones. But I don't really want to do that for this film. I kind of want to keep it as is, but I do want the film grain. We just want to bring the film color down and the curve all the way down. One of the film grains that I like is 3perf and also Academy. Academy softens the image just a little bit, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go to 3perf, and I'm going to drop the grain down to 75 or 80. So let's say 75. And that gives us a little bit of film grain texture. So guys, thanks for watching. My name is Paul Del Vecchio. If you're interested in me possibly doing color work for your film, click on the calendar link below, schedule a phone appointment, and we'll talk about how we can get some color work going for your film.